Hi everyone, Katrina here. And when I began to try to understand what action research was about, I went out and I bought myself a bestseller. I don't know if you can see this, it's not the first edition, but it's called The Sage Handbook of Action Research, and it's by Peter Reason and by our guests today, Hilary Bradbury. So I'm delighted to welcome you, Hilary. And I was also glad to hear that although you're coming from Oregon in the USA, you have some Irish roots and you actually began your academic career in Trinity College Dublin. Now, there have been expanded your career an awful lot since then. You've spent 20 years in professional organization development, and you also work with educators. But I think one of the things that you'll be sharing with us today is something you mentioned last week, that you've just finished a new book called How to Do Action Research Transformations. And the action researchers will have great benefits of us from that. Those of us who are in networks probably are aware of your Action Research Plus network, where there are an amazing amount of topics, research settings, and locations involved in the content that is there. And I think that you value action research and that network as a place where we can learn, cross-pollinate ideas, and amplify innovative efforts and voices. So thank you very much for coming today, and I look forward to being able to share some of the wisdom of action research transformations with you today. I'll hand over to you now, Hilary, for about the next half hour. The stage is yours.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you, Katrina. Thank you, my friends NEARI and Louise McCullough, who's actually in one of our groups in AR Plus. So you can ask her if we're worth hanging out with. But what do I want to say? Yeah, growing up in Ireland and going to Trinity actually had a huge influence on me, for sure. You know, just the Irish concern is kind of built into our systems. The Irish concern for social justice, I think, has stayed with me my whole life. And while I'd love us to talk a little bit about education and so on, I've begun to think of education as almost like a societal endeavor that many of us need to educate and re-educate and stay in the game of lifelong learning if we're to have the kind of societies that we need with the growing complexity around us. A little bit what's at the heart of my talk. May I, just because we're such a small group, may I ask us to go into chat? I'd love to hear how many years you've been doing action research, you know, because it's different, just 6 months versus, you know, I've been doing this for 30, 40 years. So it would just help me just know a little bit more before we get to know each other. And years in the game, so to speak. 20 years, that's a fine time. Just started, all right. A complete novice, all right. All right. And it's lovely that that Zoom allows international, all the way from South Africa, all the way from England, and even the deep south of Cork. That was, that's great. All right, so I have a few slides, and then I was thinking 2 instances of conversation, but I'm very happy to just take feedback, but no, like we're small enough group, we just stay together however we want to do it. But I want to show you this first, how much action research has been growing in the world. Maybe you may be aware of this. Do you see this slide here with the graph at I could see some thumbs up that you can see the slides. Yeah. Notice here that this word action research has been kind of going off the charts, and I just very, very interesting. And this was just like a little search on Google Scholars that some colleagues did. So there's very important, I think, that's happening in the world that those of us who are engaged in action research are kind of at the front of. And I read it as a desire to get away from just this distanced understanding of all our because God knows we have a lot of problems, to actually engaging, jumping in and doing something. And that's that engaging, jumping in and doing something is what I'm calling transformations. And it's transformations to the degree that we understand that we are just agents of change, you know, working on children or working on our neighbors or working on our spouses, although I do. We're also working with ourselves. We're bringing ourselves into the transformation. And so, yeah, so I'm the curator. I call myself a curator, really just trying to bring good things together and loving to know now about NEARI. So the editor, here's how I define research transitions. I love that green book, Katrina, and there's a pink one that came out after it that I'll even get you a discount if you want it. It's the one that came out in 2015. And so I'm building on that and also bringing my own voice. So in some way, been a lot behind the scenes and very happily so, editing, curating, bringing the community of action researchers together. And then this particular book, I mean, there's been other books too, but this particular book is more enunciating beside the issue of transformation at this time of I mean, I think the word apocalypse is okay to use. I was an biology student at Trinity. You know, apocalypse means taking the lid off. Like it doesn't necessarily mean awful things will happen. Lid off, and you're seeing the truth of what is there. You know, a little bit like truth and reconciliation in the South African text, or all the work that's being done in Ireland about, you know, really what happened with the Catholic Church, what happened in the state school. You know, really honest about that, and to the best we can, being constructive about these things. So eco-social for me is that. It's the humanity that we need to, you know, make sure stays at the heart of our societies, but it's also the ecological systems that are truly breaking down. When I was in Wicklow, when I was in Tinahely, I happened to watch, I love Irish TV, get it on my TV player. I was watching this one about a woman, she's like a citizen scientist, I guess you'd call her. She goes out and she takes readings from her local river. And, you know, I was thinking Ireland is beautiful, beautiful rivers. We have lots of rivers and they're all beautiful. Well, you know, most of them are struggling. You know, there's too many phosphates coming in from fertilizers and stuff. So these problems are coming, and so how do action researchers, in the guise perhaps of citizen science, but more deeply as educators, how do we grapple with that? So that's the basic idea of what art is. I mean, art, it's such a fabulous little term, but action research for transformations, it's nothing different than what action research has been, but it's much more focused at the time of apocalypse. Yeah, so we're on a mission. There are many different labels. So what I'm calling art, you know, I'm really just offering a meta model. My Swedish colleagues will call it production. Otto Scharmer, whose work you may know, I consider him probably the most popular action researcher right now, and with ULabs, I think has been fabulous. Before him was the work of David Cooperwriter with appreciative inquiry. So these, you know, these scholarly, these practice labels, but all have in common, I think, that learning is at the heart of our work, and that we're producing new knowledge and we're organizing innovation, which of course is what educators, well, certainly the learning, producing new knowledge is what educators have always been doing, but then organizing innovation is what's of great interest to me. Colorful here is the UN 17 sustainability goals, and they're just arranged in a way that I personally like, because, you know, without the biosphere on the bottom, so that's, you know, the clean water and the healthy food, we're not going to survive. And, you know, the idea that it's not such a problem, I think I've been following sustainability for years, wrote my dissertation on it, had the honor, I won't go into the detail, but just tell you the short bottom line. I had the honor of sitting with multiple Nobel Prize winners at one point as they were thinking together about sustainability. And, you know, I was kind of scared thinking, oh my God, there'll be all these equations on the board, all these brilliant people, but they were extremely focused on the fragility of our food systems. They said, you know, when you really look at it and you bring it all together and you look at the physics, the food systems are in danger. So, you know, and this was 20 years ago when I was writing my dissertation. So, you know, I don't mean to be scary or anything, but just the idea that our education, to be honest about the world, I think is super important. And then inside of that, society, issues of equity, equality. As usual, I see many more women than men. I think there's something beautiful about men and women leading together in this, but women really owning our voice as leaders of society. And as you may know, the partnership goal number 17 is right at the top. And I think that's really the heart of Action Research. It's like, that's our sustainability goal. How do we do it? How do we talk about doing it? How do we make visible the difficult work that we are doing? Katrina mentioned my book. You'll forgot it before it comes out. It won't come out till next year. But for me, it's really, you know, all that work in science and college, you know, the human sciences coming together with the social sciences. So I think it's the Irish and the American part of me coming together around issues of social justice. And I put a relational focus at the heart of it. Now, I think all action researchers do. But I don't really have emphasized and made it visible enough. And as a consequence, I have seen action research over the years being treated, not by educators, but by other groups, shall we say, as almost like a project management tool. And that makes me very sad, because there is a transformative element inside of action research that transforms, if you do it well, that transforms all of us. And I think that's what we're up to at this point in time. It's kind of a knowledge creation for action. And it's alive, actually. Nothing wrong with feeling alive. So 3 spaces of art. I kind of boil it all down, 3 spaces of art and 7 quality choice points, but I'm putting the relational, therefore, at the top. You know, this relational space, how we engage in a quality of relationship, trust, the way you read out your ethics piece at the beginning. These little incredibly important things, we're kind of saying to each other, this is how we're going to partner, these are our agreements. To me, all of that is relational space, being the other as a person equally important to myself. Easy to say, but keep coming back to that action research, and all of a sudden the kids who are our students become equally important. See, that's kind of a radical statement. Or Louise, if I may completely embarrass you in public, the work that Louise is doing, you know, work for stakeholders and learning with them about how to have basically a better addiction recovery system. That rational thing is very different from just coming in on the top and telling people. And I think we know that, and we don't make it obvious enough. So really encouraging us to make it more obvious. The conceptual piece for me, that's always been there, but I'm more interested is seeing what's in there and reframing many of our ideas, often reframing. So it's really conceptual reframing, but you know, if you just have these, you know, little pictures, you just want one word. So conceptual really is conceptual reframing. And then experimental, how NEARI does its work, but I'm really keen that action researchers be much more experimental, much more doing something, the pudding. I've seen, I think, too many action researchers kind of fall off into multiple interpretation things. Okay, fine, but we have to be brave enough, I think, to offer solutions, you know, with some humility, because maybe our solutions aren't always the best. Let me stop there, because I've already talked a bit. I was thinking maybe at this point we might go into small groups. I've given you just like a little bit of this concern for transformations. Would love to know about your concerns. So what if we were to go into groups, maybe threes, and the question is, you know, obviously, if you don't know each other, create a little bit of fictional space, and then maybe share what's at the frontier. I think that's my positive way, you know, in America, we try to be very positive. My positive way of saying challenge. What's your challenge? Well, what are you most interested in at this particular frontier moment of so, and then we'll come back and share a little bit of that. And if appropriate, I will continue.